Hey folks, before we get started, I'm going to call to your attention a guy right here. His name is Joseph Tyner, and he does an amazing job for the forum as our sound guy, and he's just stepped up to the plate the entire forum season to haul gear through rain, sleet, and snow. Listen to my quirky, subjective orders on where to lay cable, and he's just done an amazing job, and I want to say thank you. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tyner, you're on.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Washington County Public Affairs Forum, a noon meeting is beginning. This is Monday, June 20th. The Public Affairs Forum, despite certain inertia, aims to get issues out to the public, whether the public wants to see them or not. And we think there's important things out there. And we have a cable TV service that we provide. We have a streaming video. We have video online. We've got the Facebook. But again, the members of the Public Affairs Forum are trying to get issues out. And one of the most important issues out there is water and how we use water. And we've got Diane Taniguchi-Dennis, the Deputy General Manager of Clean Water Services, that's going to talk about the Fernhill Wetlands. Several of the wetlands, the Jackson Slough area, the Fernhill Wetlands are very cutting edge improvements in what's existed in the past. And Washington County's Clean Water Services is leading the country in some of this technology. So I would like to invite her up here, and I usually have people introduce themselves just because in the past people have claimed inventions such as the automobile and things of that nature. And after having read those for several years, I've decided to let people tell other people what they think is important about their lives. And so, Diane, would you come up and tell us about the wonderful services the agency is providing? And you can introduce yourself also.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here to address the Washington County Public Affairs Forum and to share with you the exciting things that are happening at the Fernhill Wetlands that's located on Fernhill Road next to our Forest Grove Clean Water Facility. I'm Diane Taniguchi-Dennis, and it's a pleasure to serve all of you in Washington County as the Deputy General Manager for Clean Water Services. I joined the district pretty recently in August of 2011, and it's really a wonderful place to be able to provide my public service. But before we begin discussing our Fernhill Wetlands Improvement and Water Reuse Project, I wanted us all to take a moment to ponder about how we as individuals value water in our daily lives as we work, as we live, and as we play here in Washington County. Water is often perceived simply as a substance, as H2O, the universal solvent that's used to create the goods and the buildings of our progress, to quench our thirst, to grow our food, to water our lawns, to fight our fires, and to wash our wastes away. It's a substance that we use and dispose of down the drain. As Oregonians, we place great value in the natural beauty of the Pacific Northwest with our clean air, our clean water, and the myriad of local foods that we can choose from. Yet in our recent surveys here in Washington County, we find that even though we place a very high value on our water resources, our citizens do not feel a very close personal connection to the river in their daily lives. And this is something that concerns us as we move into the future generations and the provision of water in Washington County. At the root of our social and cultural perception of water is that most of us live in urban areas where water flows by, often unappreciated in culverts and ditches. We have clean water delivered to our homes and our businesses by a simple turn of a tap. The technology that we use to deliver clean water is hidden. It's underground, it's behind closed doors, and behind security fences. Our society has become increasingly insulated and blind to the inherent beauty and wonder in the ecosystem and the technology that creates clean water. On a global scale, water is the common trust for all of humanity. Water knows not of geopolitical boundaries. Water is essential for all life, whether human, animal, or plants. All water on this earth is used and reused. Our hydrologic cycle is powered by the sun, and it's elegant. Water that evaporates into the atmosphere quickly falls back to us as precipitation. The average time that water spends in our atmosphere is just 9 days. The time water spends in our lakes and our rivers, where we can most influence it, is generally considered to have a time with us of weeks to months. By contrast, once water reaches the ocean, it can stay there for a very, very long time on this earth. The average time it stays in the ocean is often more than 3,000 years, which is very interesting. Because when we begin to think about where water is on the earth, we find that 97.5% of the Earth's water, of 1.386 billion cubic kilometers of water, is sailing in our oceans, with only 2.5% available as fresh water. And of that fresh water that's available, approximately almost 70% is stored frozen in our ice caps, in our glaciers, in our permafrost, with 30% in our groundwater. And only 0.4%, you look at the beaker, it's that little strip of red, is really in our surface water, or our atmospheric water. So when you look at it from another view, of a series of these little rect squares, of the 0.4% of surface water and atmospheric water, approximately only 67.4% is in lakes, 8.5% of that's in wetlands, and 1.6% is in rivers, with the rest in plants and animals and humans and soil moisture in the atmosphere. So when you think about it, the Tualatin River, its tributary streams, and places like Fernhill are part of that precious 0.4%. We're truly blessed to have the river here in Washington County. So some of you may remember some of the history of Clean Water Services, that we first started as the Unified Sewerage Agency in 1970. And some of you may have remembered the history where we were created by the vote of the people. And it was created to solve the water pollution issues that were plaguing the Tualatin River. As the Washington County and the communities grew, there were 26 separate wastewater treatment facilities that operated at varying degrees of water quality performance, and that caused the state of Oregon to issue a building moratorium in the county. In 2006, we rebranded our name to Clean Water Services, and it's more reflective of our vision to enhance the environment and quality of life in the Tualatin River watershed through visionary and collaborative management of our water resources in partnership with others. Today, Clean Water Services is a county service district that serves a population of more than 525,000 in cooperation with 12 cities. We have 4 regional treatment facilities, so we went from 26 down to 4. And these 4 facilities are located here on this drawing. Our Durham Treatment Facility, our Rock Creek Treatment Facility, our Hillsborough Treatment Facility, and our Forest Grove Facility. And combined, these facilities treat over 60 million gallons of sewage per day. That's a lot of sewage that comes from this county, to some of the highest quality of water in the nation. Our Rock Creek, so this treatment facility here, and our Durham facility here operates all year round, whereas currently our Forest Grove facility and our Hillsborough facility only operates during the winter time. And all of the flow from Forest Grove and Hillsborough during the summertime is transported through 2 24-inch lines to the Rock Creek treatment facility. So the Fernhill project is a keystone, and it's a game-changer project for the district. And the reason is that it will allow us to utilize all year round both the Forest Grove and the Hillsborough facility by providing the additional treatment that's necessary so that we can operate these facilities during the summer months. It will also offload the Rock Creek facility from having to treat the water from Forest Grove and Hillsborough during the summer, so we can preserve that very important capacity as we grow industrial in the North Hillsborough area. It's a very important ability to utilize the assets that we have already invested in to their fullest potential. So let's take a look at the area where the Fernhill project is located off of Fernhill Road. The white line on this drawing is the boundary of land that's owned by Clean Water Services. It's 748 acres. Back in 1940, a wastewater treatment facility was built, it's right in that corner there, for the city of Forest Grove. And then later in 1964, its capacity was expanded by adding these sewage lagoons here. And then in 1992, the Fernhill Wetlands Management Council was formed with both the Fernhill Wetlands Council and the Friends of Fernhill Wetlands, because over time, these ponds, rather than being used as sewage ponds, they became really ponds that the migratory birds were using as a natural area. In 2006, Clean Water Services purchased the land and the Forest Grove treatment plant. And in 2008, we began a master plan as the beginning for the vision of the Fernhill Wetlands and this whole surrounding area. The treatment plant was recently upgraded in 2011 to a full secondary treatment plant, and the concept of the natural treatment system was developed starting in 2010. So there's a lot of history here with the Fernhill wetlands themselves, as well as the history with how we can best utilize our assets to create a cost-effective wastewater treatment system for our county. The start of some new energy that's being put out there. Right at the entrance here, there's a brand new picnic shelter and restroom. And in 2012, Clean Water Services constructed the very first phase of the treatment wetlands that includes a water feature and some bridges to allow for pedestrian access. There is a significant number of partners that are part of this project, and it's a project that will take place between now and 2017. So our project goals. This is a lovely picture of Fernhill Lake, and what we want to do is provide cost-effective water quality improvements so we can be attentive to our ratepayers, to create rates that are something that we can all be willing and able to support, to advance wastewater treatment sciences for natural treatment systems, because the reality is these wastewater treatment plants can remove 99% of the pollutants, and what's remaining are those things that the plants and the animals and the system needs to be able to transform into food and into growth. And so that's the purpose of the natural treatment systems, to create a higher ecological value of the water before the water is returned to the river itself. We're going to be enhancing habitat and the wetland function, as well as providing a space for education and recreation. It's somewhat hard to believe that you can go to a wastewater treatment plant for recreation and education, and through this beautiful space, we'll be able to enhance that out there. This is an overview of the project site, and the current focus is in the wetlands themselves. So in the next, between now and 2015, our primary work will be in this area here. But in future years, we'll be taking a look at enhancing this agricultural area and the mitigation wetland zone, as well as the agricultural areas here to the west. So it all starts with the Forest Grove Clean Water Facility. And as I said, it transforms 98% of the carbon, the nitrogen, and the phosphorus into biosolids that can be reused as soil amendments and agricultural lands, and it also produces clean water. The natural treatment system will further cool the water and transform the remaining carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus into plants and food for the wildlife. This picture is a cutaway of where Forest Grove Clean Water water facility is, and the water will be pumped from the treatment facility up to the top here, and the water from Hillsborough will also come in a pipeline to this point. It would then go through the upper treatment wetlands, down through here. There will be a lower set of treatment wetlands, and they will, both the top and the bottom will come together in the mixing wetland. Let me see if I can find my pointer here. I think it has, it's stopped working, so we'll put that aside. It's a little bit of a technology failure here. But there's a mixing wetland where that number 1 is, and then that was the very first project that we constructed, and then it went through a series of aeration steps through waterfalls, and then down into Fernhill Lake itself. And then the next phase, this is a shot a little further away, where we're going to be focusing on the Fernhill Lake, the Eagle Perch Marsh, and Cattail Marsh to be able to have them function better. And then the water at first will go back into a pipe, back to the Tualatin River. In later years, we'll be able to use the water as irrigation water for the agricultural land on the east and ultimately on the west. We have to build berms to be able to create treatment wetlands, and as part of that, it's for maintenance. So if we're going to build berms for the treatment wetlands themselves and for maintenance, we might as well make those available to the public, so that you can create a public space where citizens can come and they can view birds and they can recreate and to be able to get outside and enjoy sunny days like we have here today here in Oregon. So in terms of the project timeline, we started planting, if any of you have been out there recently, with some native plant restoration. The restroom and the public picnic shelter was built, and we built our first 3-acre treatment wetland and the water garden. In 2013, you'll start seeing some work on the upper treatment wetlands and some lower pond enhancements, and through 2014 and 15 is when we'll complete the upper treatment wetlands. That was a quick gathering of folks on July 31st of 2012, where we dedicated the picnic shelter and restroom. And the restrooms were extremely important. In fact, it competed well for a grant through the State Parks Department, because people came out to this wonderful space, but there really was no facilities to have used. So it was a partnership between the City of Forest Grove, the Fernhill Wetland Council, Clean Water Services, and the Oregon Department of Parks and Recs to be able to create this facility. And it's also an important stop as part of the Oregon Bikeway that is going to be created in the future. Before we constructed the very first phases of that first wetland and reconfigured the shore at Fernhill Lake, this is what it looked like. So essentially a big asphalt pad and some facilities that our field operations folks use. So if you can kind of keep this picture in mind, then this is what we created. So this is a pretty quick snapshot of the new treatment wetlands and the re-aeration waterfalls that were created. And this is the location at the very edge of the waterfalls there where we'll meet water quality requirements so that it'll enable us to use the water for irrigation and other things. So this is what it looked like, an asphalt storage pad in May of 2012. This is what it began transforming this next few months. This is a crew from Creasu International. They began hand placing the boulders for a water feature. So what looks like a beautiful waterfall actually has a treatment function, and that function is to create oxygen in the water, which is needed to sustain the water as it goes into the to nature itself. So it's a requirement that we have, but instead of using large blowers and diffusers and mechanical systems, we were able to accomplish the same thing using gravity and rocks in a very beautiful way. So there's 1,000 tons of boulders that came from a local tiger quarry that went into building this feature out there. So that's one of the results with the very first flow, putting over the waterfalls as we're testing the hydraulics. So it's a beautiful place to be able to come and enjoy the environment as well as a place where we can learn about water and also reuse water. It's interesting, we're just in the very early phases of construction, and we have folks like on Grant's Getaways, on KGW's TV Channel 8, they already came to feature what's going on at Fernhill, and there's a lot of excitement. It's generated hundreds of people coming to visit the area. It's generated folks being interested in ecotourism in the area. There was a Fernhill ale that was brewed just for this particular project, and folks are enjoying coming to the site. There's a coffee, I hear, that's now being roasted. But there's just a lot of excitement about being involved in this area and being able to link both ecotourism and business and community support. So this is a group of folks that came for the Birds in Beer. That was on October 6, 2012, and I hear there's another event being planned that's going to be Birds, Beer, and Wine, I hear, this year. But it's a collaboration with the Intertwine Alliance, Portland Audubon, McMinimans Grand Lodge, who brewed the beer, and the Fernhill Wetlands Council. It was a great event to celebrate. Children are coming to the site, and they always have, but they're very interested in augmenting the science learning about biology and chemistry and also the physics of water. And there's many children. These are second graders from the Forest Grove Community School that came this past fall. There's school groups coming to plant. There's community groups coming to work on the landscaping. There's photographers that come to the site to take pictures of the very interesting species that are there. And that bottom picture of a shorebird, it was an exciting event. The shorebirds hadn't been to the site in many, many years. And all we did was lower the elevation of the water in the big lake. And for some unexplainable reason, they all knew that there was shoreline and mud created. And these birds came from afar to visit the site. Just another shot that Gary Wilt has taken in the Fernhill Wetlands. Just a very beautiful space. I invite all of you to come and enjoy it right here in our Washington County. Thank you.
Well, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to be lenient. The furor of the one question rule is going to relax a little bit. On this occasion alone, board members are going to be able to ask a follow-up question without hearing from me. So everyone that's hid that follow-up question deep within their psyche, the one they always want to ask and then follow up on, let it go. Let your hair down. Come on up. Ask that question and that follow-up question, and you won't hear from me. Okay, Jim? Thank you, Jim. Come on up.
I'm Bill Kroger, forum member, and thank you for coming today. I do have two questions. One is a quick one. You were talking about recreation at Fernhill Lake. I was wondering, does that include fishing?
No, there's no fishing
Okay.
in Fernhill Lake. The fish that are there are for the birds themselves.
Okay. The other question I have is that, I don't know if it really pertains, but a lot of public places like this, not just the lake, but I'm talking about the facilities and everything, a big issue in these days is security. And I was just wondering if you guys had thought about the security and what kind of things you have done.
That's something that's very much at the thoughts of folks. We've installed a camera out there. It's not a security camera in the sense that we have a security team that's overlooking this, but it's a way that we can not only track what's going on, but also to also be watchful of things. I think as citizens that it's incumbent upon us, each of us, as we visit these spaces and utilize these spaces, to be able to reclaim them for the public as a whole. And I know it's difficult, sometimes folks are fearful, but with the people that are out at Fernhill, and they've always been out there, they feel very safe in terms of walking and jogging and enjoying the nature. But I'm our hope is that there will be people that will come here to study and to watch the birds, as well as people that will come here to learn about water itself, and others that will just come to enjoy the trails that will be created out there. But yes, security, and I think that's incumbent upon all of us to maintain that.
Board member questions off topic, just because of the Multnomah County election tomorrow. It's assumed that most Washington County water is fluoridated, and that decision was made back in the 20th century, and there was no public complaint about it, so there was no public vote about it. Is that correct?
You know, fluoride here in Washington County and in the Portland area is an issue that I have personally been involved in, so I can't really comment about the history of fluoride, other than in the other communities that I worked in Salem and both Albany as their public works director. Fluoride was very important to the communities. It was put in place by the vote of the people, but that's not to say that there aren't folks that are very concerned about fluoride, and there are concerns about adding additional chemicals into the water source. So it's really a public choice, it's a public decision as to how do we as citizens and as society want to deal with the issues of children's teeth and health, but it's often a very personal decision and often a very controversial decision.
But is most Washington County water is fluoridated?
I don't really know. That's, yeah. Much of the water comes from, some of it from the Bull Run, so from Bull Run it certainly isn't, but I don't know about the other water facilities.
Hi, Phil Nelson, farm member. I've been reading about shortages of water nationwide and problems with drawing down an aquifer that apparently has water 10,000 years old in it. I was wondering what planning, if any, Clean Water Services has done, or long-term projections in regard to water supply and changes in climate.
Thank you, that's a great question. So Clean Water Services, our focus is the provision of sewage treatment as well as stormwater. But certainly it's all water, whether it's drinking water, stormwater, or wastewater in itself. So Clean Water Services has a long history of collaborating with its water partners for the potable supply sources and the planning that's going on. The Hag Lake project is extremely important to Clean Water Services. If you can imagine as this county grows, and imagine as we bring another 80 million gallons of drinking water from the Willamette source, that water has to go somewhere. That water needs to be treated. And that water ultimately will go back to the Tualatin River. And as part of wastewater treatment, we need to have the adequate river flows to be able to support that water returning to the river. So the Hag Lake project is certainly extremely important to the district. And in terms of planning for the long-term water supply needs, we feel it's a very important role for us to collaborate with our partners. Climate change is an interesting issue, and we'll see as time goes on how it begins affecting us here in the region. There's some projections, and the error bar is very wide as to what's really going to happen. And looking at all of the data and the research, it's pretty clear that things will be more chaotic. The extremes of very wet years versus extremes of very dry years, we're going to see that. And the district is planning through its stormwater planning as well as the wastewater planning as we move forward. But it's pretty clear we need more resilient systems, and our streams and our creeks and our river is going to be challenged at both ends of those extremes. So together we do need to plan.
Chris Leslie, farm member. A number of questions. One, the asteroid belts are mostly contain water, and the Earth is bombarded with water every day. And how, with the new space projects and space service, we can have water for the rest of our lives, no matter what. And you're playing the scare card. We're running out of water. We're not running out of water ever. And this is an anti-science viewpoint, and I think you should be called to task for that.
Now that's interesting about the water cycle. I think it's not so much a scare tactic, but it's really looking at the reality as to where our water is and how it moves through the hydrologic cycle and how we understand our sources of fresh water and what our access to water is. But I certainly think we need to plan not only for our current generation, but our future generations to come. And as we envision Washington County growing, as we envision the state of Oregon growing, where are we going to get our sources of water? So it's not so much a scare tactic, but it's really the reality of where are our freshwater sources. So it's groundwater or it's surface water. But there's also the potential to reuse our water that comes from our treatment facilities themselves. We can reuse it for irrigation, like we currently do, to irrigate some golf courses and landscaping. But there's certainly other ways to reuse the water. And I think we'll see what this next generation will bring and the planning that we'll do together.
Aren't there any environmental groups against building in the wetlands?
For this particular project, there aren't any environmental groups that are concerned about this particular project. We're making sure that we're talking to all of the groups, whether it's the Tuolumne River Keepers or it's the Audubon Society, all of the folks that have an interest in this site. I think there is a broader issue related to wetlands themselves, and it's an issue that is not only statewide, but it's an issue certainly nationally about how we view the function of these wetlands as we develop the land. And certainly in Washington County, we have a system of linked wetlands and also wetlands that aren't linked together, but certainly the function as a whole as we move forward, as we develop our land, is certainly something that we're working on.
This would be a yes or no. Don't you believe that we have the resources and space to supply our water for the rest of Earth's life?
You know, I hadn't thought of that angle, so that's a very interesting one that you bring up. So it's something I'll certainly take a look at. I hadn't thought through that, but thank you.
I'm surprised you weren't gifted with a degree in astrophysics. But I suppose we should expect a broad range of questions. I've been asking broad one too, so Chris, don't feel too bad. John Tyner, forum member. The current configuration of the Tuolumne River is based upon a compromise that was made some years ago in the 50s between the three jurisdictions, Multnomah County, Washington County, and Clackamas County, which resulted in Sucker Lake becoming Lake Oswego, and essentially the Tuolumne River being an agricultural watering zone. Are you familiar with that decision and how it came about?
No, I'm not.
Then I'll go to my next question. We're going to talk about Kuiper Belt and asteroid belt. We can talk about historical decisions back regarding water supply. The interaction of the various water supplies. We have the Jackson Slough, which is run by Hillsborough, is that correct? Or?
The Jackson Bottom Wetlands?
Yeah,
it's a partnership with Clean Water Services and the City of Hillsborough.
And you've got the Durham site down there by Tiger High School. You've got the Fernhill Wetlands, and you have the Metro plan to try to have water ways connected and wildlife ways connected. I'm going to step back to a little global thing. What is the interaction of all those things in Clackamas County, Washington County, Multnomah County? Sort of an overview in, say, 5 to 15 minutes.
That's a big question. And that's, I think, one of the thorny questions of the future is how we allocate water in all of these basins. So certainly our drinking water supplies come from the Tuolumne River themselves, as well as water that comes from Portland, and now water that's going to be developed by the City of Tigard in partnership with others, and plus the water source that's coming from the Willamette River. So it's pretty clear that water is something that we need here in Washington County to flourish. It's something our businesses and our citizens certainly value. Washington County's growth is based upon the availability of clean water, and the flip side of clean water for potable supply is the question of wastewater. So as we import and bring these water sources into the Tuolumne River watershed, we're certainly rich with water at that point, and the question becomes, what do we want to do in the long run with that water and the planning for the water? But certainly there's been long-term water supply collaboration that's been done. I think this county is secure in its water sources and its planning. I think we're going to have a bit of a challenge to know what to do with all of that water once we do utilize it all. But I think it also opens up opportunities. Opportunities to be able to uplift our local stream corridors, to get them to ecologically function better. It links to our stream side planting, where we're trying to shade and create more robust riparian zones so that we can have a better ability to deal with the issues coming to us in the future.
Well, Diane, thank you so much for being here and presenting this really interesting information about Washington County. John McWilliams, a forum member. We talked a little bit, I heard a little bit about the Tualatin River and things that happened to that river. Can you talk a little bit about maybe about how Clean Water Services has something to do with to help out the fish there? Maybe there's no fish in the Fernhill Lake, but there certainly is fish in the Tualatin River, and I understand that there are certain times that you have to add some more water or something like that. Are you familiar with that?
Sure.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, the function of Hag Lake is extremely important to the Tualatin River. It allows us to add minimum stream flows and to maintain water in the river itself. There's some wonderful historical pictures where I think it was one of the local farmers and citizens where they were able to literally stand and straddle the river itself. The river ran between his legs. We simply didn't have enough water in the Tualatin River because we were overusing it. We were using it for human needs, but yet there wasn't enough water for the river itself. The river has particularly some pretty big challenges because we're pretty much rain-fed. We don't have a snowpack that we can rely upon. So the reservoirs of Arnie Reservoir and Hag Lake allows us to, through the rainy season, store water, and then through the drier seasons to be able to release water into the rivers so we can use it for agricultural uses as well as for human potable needs. So the issues with the river itself, the river, when you look at it, it's much better than it was from back in the 70s with the upgrades that we did to the sewage treatment plants, but also much better because of the water that Clean Water Services releases to the river itself. In the future, as we bring in more water to our region and we need to treat that water, we need more stream flow to be able to deal with that water. So certainly the dam raise is a very important project to Clean Water Services. So as we are in the county, we need to look at water holistically, not only what's needed for potable supply, but what's needed for agriculture, what's needed for the environment, and also for wastewater. But certainly continuing to partner, as we have done here in Washington County, is critical in the future.
Follow, if you don't mind. So I understand, though, that from the treatment plants, they put water back into the river. There's a little bit of a problem, and the water is cleaner than the river water. And so that could be a problem for the fish. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, the issues with the fish are very complex. There's somewhat issues related to temperature, so the thermal temperature of the river itself. There's other concerns about particular water chemistry that folks are interested in, but it's really a balance of all of those things. And what Fernhill is going to do is create a water that has been in contact with the plants and with the soil, and it will create a more robust food web. And that's really what the fish need. They need the macrovertebrates, they need the algae, they need all of the other food sources to be able to flourish. So it's not only just about the water chemistry or about the thermal things that are needed, but at Fernhill, we're moving into the future, looking at what it is that those fisheries need also from a food web standpoint. So that's why Clean Water Services invests not only in wastewater treatment, so that's the water chemistry part of it, but we also invest in uplifting the river and its tributary streams themselves with shade, and also by controlling the pollution that comes from stormwater. itself. So it's really all of those things put together. But ultimately, you need to have a robust biological system in the river itself. And that's what Fernhill is starting to do.
John Hutzler, forum member. As you mentioned, water is water, and I'm wondering whether there are advantages to having a single agency manage all water resources. Here in Washington County, we actually have several agencies that are responsible for drinkable water, and Clean Water Services deals with stormwater and wastewater. But are there advantages to unifying that function so that rather than having to coordinate with other agencies, you actually manage the whole process?
That's a really interesting question. I think for a region itself, it's a complex question because we're not only a county, but we're also made up of cities. And the cities themselves are providers of service, both for potable supply and also their own collection systems. We work through partnerships. My personal belief is working through collaborative partnerships is what makes Washington County strong. You could certainly have a model of a single unified agency, but certainly the model that we have today also works, and there's a lot of strength in it. We view things from different lenses and from different perspectives. It's important to have agricultural interests as well as the needs for the urban areas. And I think because of the way we are structured in Washington County, and I think the collaborations that we have work very well, and I think are very important. But you can certainly have either model.
John Leeper, forum member. Thank you very much for a very informative presentation. You brought up different facets of water as a general subject that I don't think have been addressed to us before. I, for several years, have been of the opinion that Clean Water Services is almost a two-headed monster. Two-headed in that you take care of cleaning up the water as well as stormwater management. That's one function, I think. The other is, I think you are almost a frustrated construction management outfit because in addition to continuously expanding your capacity, you also got a continuing need to accommodate new requirements from both federal and state agencies. And I was wondering if you either could or would address what your capital improvement budget is, both for this year as well as in the past. It is, I think, well up into the seven figures, but that's just speculation on my part.
Sure, the capital budget runs on average about $60 million a year. And the purpose of this is that there are some communities, so if you're a city, unlike other cities in the valley, you would often borrow the money and you would do a very large expansion. But from a business perspective, you're laying a lot of assets down that are going to remain idle for quite a long time. So if you build a treatment facility that's going to last 20 years, most of your assets are lying idle. That's one issue. The second issue is that technology in wastewater treatment is rapidly changing, whether it's equipment itself or the types of biological systems that are used. So the technology that we used to use in the 70s and 80s is really outdated for the year 2013 and beyond. So not only would you have invested in assets that are idle, you would have invested in technology that is old. So Clean Water Services has adopted a strategy in which we make investments in a timely manner. So we have adequate capacity. So if we get a big industry or some big growth occurs, we do maintain some capacity to be able to accommodate those over time. But really, we're building increments of capacity so that we can take advantage of the current, more modern technology, as well as building facilities when they're needed in time. So in terms of Clean Water Services and the number of people that we're serving here in the county, it makes a lot more sense to be able to build these. We call it just in time, but in reality, it's time to meet permit requirements, it's timed to meet capacity needs and growth that's going on within the county. And from a money perspective, and many of you are business people, I mean, you wouldn't want to invest in a manufacturing facility that had way too much capacity that was idle for most of the time. So I think from a business perspective, take advantage of the current construction climate that we have that has brought us very good bids, plus build technology that is current and relevant, not only for now, but also in the future, and build the capacity that you need with a little bit more so that you can be able to effectively address the needs for the county. But in terms of the value that it creates for all of you, is that it's wiser investments in a timely manner, and we're not idling any capacity and taking advantage of technology. So that's the value that's created.
Eric Squires, forum member. Diane, first, great job. Really enjoyable presentation. Thank you. My question is as follows. I was recently reading Oregon fishing guidelines, and I was horrified to see the restrictions, including daily intake or monthly intake on certain salmon or other fish from certain areas because of pollutants. I'm wondering if you could tell me how Clean Water Services addresses pollutants, specifically like heavy metals or PCBs, any of the toxic petrochemicals, and how that impacts Clean Water Services work protocol.
Sure, that's a great question. The issue of pollution is very interesting because over time it has changed and it has evolved with our ability through science to measure and detect things to very low levels. And with pollution control, it first started with organics, so the carbon, carbon and the ability to remove suspended solids, because those were the things that were choking the rivers in terms of using all the oxygen in the rivers. And I think some of you might remember when Tom McCall did his call to action for the Willamette River. I've seen photographs of fish that were literally leaping out of the water for the lack of dissolved oxygen. So we dealt with those issues first, right? Those were the big advancements. Now the issues are more diffuse, and it's diffuse pollution. It's pollution from things that we never really thought of. It's things like the caffeine that we drink, that we then when we're done with the caffeine, go to the bathroom. The things like endocrine disruptors, the things like all of the personal care products that we use. Clean Water Services, we have a very advanced monitoring system that we partner with USGS to look at these, I call them the wicked problems of the world, because certainly as we understand the products that we use and the limitations to our willingness to pay for some of this technology that it will take in the future to deal with these things, it's certainly policy and issues that we're going to face, but certainly we track the issues that are going on globally in the European nations. And there is a whole area of science in terms of natural treatment systems that has a lot of benefit to removing not only heavy metals through the existing treatment plants, through the chemicals and the energy that we add, but also looking at this diffuse pollution as really, there is no removal. It's really how do we transform these constituents and cycle them through the environment that's appropriate for us as humans and for the aquatic environment. There is a lot of concern about fish consumption and the things that are bioaccumulating in fish, and together I think this is a global issue as well as a national and a state issue to think about these pollutants. And really it's not the notion of removal, but it's going to become a notion of do we need to use these things in the very first place. But these are going to be the thorny issues, not only for this generation, but I think generations to come.
Lee Coleman, forum member. I was struck by your statement that a lot of these facilities remain idle for a long time until they come into full usefulness. And that raises a question for me of what kind of amortization period you're using in order to charge ratepayers or property taxpayers. It would seem to me that if you're going to amortize an idle project, you want a rather lengthy amortization period, and I don't see that. So what is the policy on that?
Sure, that'd be a great discussion that we could have at a future forum. The issue of rates and how do we pay for these facilities is a very important one. And the capital projects themselves are supported by systems development charges as well as by rates. So the portions of the treatment facility that all of the existing citizens utilize that need to have technology upgrades, that's something that we would pay through rates, usually through bond issuances. The portion that is for future growth is how we pay for it through systems development charges. Basically, our bonds are 20-year bonds, so we're building enough rates and systems development charges to be able to pay for these facilities in a 20-year period. But some of the structures themselves do have probably a longer life, a 50-year life, but we're building the structures so they're flexible, that they can be retrofitted with the newer pumps and the newer technology. Those could have a life of anywhere from 10 to 20 years. So it really depends on the asset itself. But the underlying principle is with these large capital investments, we utilize debt financing to be able to do them, as well as pay as you go.
I don't know, you, John, as a board member, in the memory of my life, and that people have told me the stories, Rumors Rest in Tiger was actually a resort where people boated. And in the last century, steamboats actually went to Forest Grove as part of a process up and down the river. And as I understand, we're talking to the folks deceased now, but old when I was young, the river was much more vital and became an agricultural, essential canal sometime in the 60s and 70s. Are you aware of any of those things that I was talking about, or the history of the river as a much more vital artery of commerce and recreation than it is now?
I know a little bit of the history of the Tualatin River. The history that I really recollect is the time when the water was over-allocated and over-appropriated, and the time when there really was no water in the river itself. I think that trend has reversed itself. There's certainly better stream flows in that river. There is a future. Folks are talking about a water trail on the Tualatin River with canoes. I don't know whether there will be steamboats and those types of things in our future, but it's certainly something that are, I think, dreams of what folks in the county would like to do with the river itself. But certainly the river today is in much better health than it was in yesteryears. And that's really because of all of you in this room and all of the citizens here in Washington County making the investments together with agriculture and with industry.
Again, great presentation from all. Thank you for coming here. I read something like $20 per individual property holder would be the expense of the new improvements. Do you have any budgetary figures that you can give us?
I'm not sure about that number.
Expenses.
You know, I think there may be
A tax.
yeah, see, when we talk about water, there's the water that's related to bringing the water source from the Willamette. That's one cost of water. The cost of water for Clean Water Services deals with stormwater and wastewater. So I'm not sure where that number you had.
Involved with the wetlands.
Okay, so the treatment wetlands themselves, we're looking at spending up to about $18 million with the treatment capacity that's going to be created out there. It's money that will be spent between now and 2017. When you look at the relative treatment costs of a natural treatment system versus a high-rate biological, physical, chemical treatment plant, it's much cheaper to do it utilizing the natural treatment system than it is to build more concrete tanks. We call it more concrete and steel and pumps and aeration and chemicals and energy. So when you look at the overall costs of the natural treatment system bringing the assets of Forest Grove and Hillsborough to be used year-round, and avoiding treatment expansion at Rock Creek in this time period. We're probably saving about 1.5 to 1.
I saw some pictures of the project projected that you had buildings that seemed to have no real purpose except for maybe offloading children.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so on one of the drawings, there is, there's been a dream, a vision for a learning center that the Fernhill Council has had, and they want this site to be a site of science. They want this site to be able to bring people in who are experts in wetlands and wetland treatment sciences to be able to convene and to look at this technology. There is a portion of the upper treatment wetlands, even though when you envision wetlands, you're thinking of a hole in the ground with plants. These treatment wetlands are going to be of a higher technology. So they're going to be a combined subsurface and a surface treatment wetland that has control to it. So we're going to be utilizing nature, but we're also going to be controlling the amount of flow that we put to it. These are called reciprocating or tidal subsurface wetlands that enhances the removal of nitrogen. So we're going to use nitrification and denitrification as well as phosphorus removal and metals removal. There's a particular type of media that we're going to select for these different treatment technologies. So that being said, even though they're natural treatment systems, there'll be a control component to it. So there will be a control room that's needed to be able to run the technology related to those wetlands. But the lower wetlands, that's Fernhill Lake, Eagle Perch Marsh, and Cattail Marsh, those will be the traditional natural treatment systems that just use solar energy and wind.
Do we get the gold that's extracted from the water?
You know, that's always an interesting thing about resource recovery, and Clean Water Services is investing in resource recovery. We're investing in, right now, phosphorus recovery. So we've created a product called Clean Water Grow that you can get at various locations. I think Farmington Gardens is a place, and then Ace Hardware also. But the question about metals and can we concentrate it enough to be able to remove and recover, that'll be a very good, interesting one. Not likely, though. I don't think there's enough. The place you would want to recover it is at the source of it itself.
John Leeper, I'll take another bite of the apple. I've taken tours of both Rock Creek as well as your other big facility. I think the members of the community here, as well as in the listening audience, would be bowled over if they had any real appreciation of the size of the pipes that there are at those facilities. Could you just run some numbers as to the size of a few of the both tanks as well as the pipes that are at those big facilities? Because, gee whiz, it's just almost overwhelming.
Yeah, I could probably stand in those pipes. So yeah, they're very large diameter pipelines.
Stand on my shoulders.
Yeah, I could probably stand on your shoulders. But the tanks themselves are as big as this room. But yes, the structures are massive. In order to remove that first 98 to 99% of the pollutants, filled with equipment and aeration equipment and pumps and blowers. And but I encourage anybody